Hello everyone, I'm Echo from CSDN, and today we are so excited to have Anne-Laure with us. Hey Anne-Laure, welcome to the Gravity interview series. It's so great to sit down here and chat with you in London today. To kick things off, could you briefly introduce yourself to our audience and share a bit about what you've been up to lately?
Thank you so much for having me. My name's Anne-Laure. I'm a neuroscientist here in London. I'm the founder of Nest Labs and I'm the author of Tiny Experiments, which is a book all about how to live a more experimental life.
And your book its name is Tiny Experiments, and was published in English in March 2025, and the Chinese edition came out this year. Over the past year, what reader feedback most surprised you, and what does the Chinese edition publication mean to you?
So I was very surprised with all of the different ways people apply tiny experiments in their life. In the book, I have many examples that are based on the people I worked with before. But when the book came out, people read the book and started coming up with new ways of applying tiny experiments. One of my favorite examples is one artist who decided to use tiny experiments to reconnect with their creative practice. I have seen people use experiments at work, experiments for their health, experiments for their relationships. And I think this is one of the best things about a book. You write a book as an author, you have an idea in your mind, but then the readers surprise you by coming up with new applications. And the Chinese edition is very special for me because China is a country I have always admired. I actually visited several times for my work when I was at Google. And to me, that a Chinese audience, a global audience, is interested in those ideas feels like a real privilege.
Oh, so you visited in Beijing because Google have companies in Beijing or Shanghai.
Yes, I've been to Beijing, I've been to Shanghai. I also have been to, I don't remember what it's called. You know the movie Avatar? It has the big green mountains in
Oh.
China where they filmed so many beautiful movies.
Oh yeah.
You know the name?
We have so many mountains.
So I have visited a lot. Also, the first time I was in China, I was 14 years old.
Okay, maybe I think you can share any experience in China, just like you talk with other people, and just like engineers or developers or delicious foods.
Absolutely. So for me, China is also a very special country because every time I visited China, I was so impressed with the pace and the advance of technology there. The way people pay with their phones way before we did it in Europe, for example, and the way everybody embraced technology. For me, Tiny Experiments is also about innovation, about embracing change, about embracing the future. And so for me, Chinese readers are maybe some of the best potential readers for this kind of book. And I hope to be very surprised again with the new applications that they come up with.
Okay, and when you talk with Chinese readers or other countries' readers, have you noticed the cultural differences you can share about that?
I think from the outside, I am not from China, so it is difficult for me to judge, but I have felt like there is a lot more pressure in China compared to other countries. The pressure to succeed at work, and the long hours also. So a lot of experiences of burnout, a lot of ambition. And I think success, professional success, is very important for Chinese people, which is why China has been so successful as a country. But at an individual level, I always wonder what is the impact on the mental health of workers when you have so much pressure from society.
Oh yeah, we have 996 culture.
Yeah.
And we have so stressful. Maybe you can share any your advice for us.
Yes. It's always hard to give advice to people from a different culture because I cannot really experience the difficulties that people have on an everyday basis. But I think the most powerful skill that we can all develop is the skill of metacognition. Metacognition is a word that means thinking about your own thinking, observing your thoughts, taking care of your mental space. And so instead of always being busy, 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 working, 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 being obsessed with productivity, it is very important to make space for reflection. Reflection can be on your own, for example, journaling, weekly review. A lot of people working in technology actually find it very helpful. Once a week on Monday, you sit down and you review what works and what doesn't work. Very important. You can also practice self-reflection with a friend or with a colleague. But the idea is to not keep on working, keep on making progress mindlessly. You want to be mindful of your relationship to productivity.
And then we can talk about your story. Let's go back to the beginning of your story. You worked at Google on digital health products. You made a decision. You decided to exit the system. And why? You can share the story.
So when I worked at Google at first, I thought I was so lucky that this was the best job possible that I could have. It was a very famous tech company, amazing colleagues to work with, amazing projects, a lot of ambition, a lot of creativity. And I didn't know the word at the time, but I experienced something that is called imposter syndrome. So I was worried someone would realize that they had made a mistake hiring me. So I was what I call the yes girl in the office. You came to me and you said, Anne-Laure, can you help with this presentation for tomorrow morning? And if you came to me at 7 p.m., you said, can you help with this for tomorrow morning? I said, yes, yes, don't worry. I will cancel all my plans and I will work on this tonight. And I was saying yes to everything, which meant that I didn't take care of my health, either physical health or mental health. I was canceling social plans with friends. I was not present enough with my family, all because I wanted to succeed at work. So for me, the wake-up call was when I had a health scare. So one day I was in front of the mirror brushing my teeth and I noticed that my entire arm turned purple. So I went to the Google infirmary on campus. The nurse looked at my arm and she said, you need to go to the hospital. I said, okay. So I went there. The doctors checked my arm and they said, you need to have surgery straight away. There is a blood clot in your arm that is threatening to travel to your lungs. And in that moment, what was my reaction? I didn't say, yes, let's do the surgery now. I said, 1 second. I need to check my calendar.
At the moment, I feel you are so stressful and you focus on work, didn't care your body.
Yes, I completely forgot about my body. My productivity was more important than my health. So for me, this was a wake-up moment. I realized that something was very wrong with my priorities. That was the beginning of this new journey. So I ended up leaving my job at Google and I worked on a couple of startups and then I was very lost until I decided to go back to university to study neuroscience. I wanted to explore something just for curiosity, just to learn, not to be productive, not to build a career, really just to wake up every morning and learn something new. That was the beginning of this second chapter in my life, a chapter of experimentation.
I wanted to ask you a question. How did you transition from that moment? I need to check my my calendar agenda to allowing yourself to be lost.
Yes, it was a very progressive journey. So first, I left my job at Google, but when I left my job at Google, I was so uncomfortable with not having a work identity anymore. Because when you work at a prestigious company, then it's very easy when you walk into a room to say, I work at Google. And everybody tells you, oh, you must be so smart. And it's like a very easy business card to have in work and in life. All of a sudden, I didn't have that. And I was so uncomfortable, I decided to do the next most socially sanctified, accepted thing that you can do in Silicon Valley. So I worked on a startup. I didn't work on a startup because I was passionate about the mission. I worked on a startup because I wanted to have this clear work identity again. And then the best thing that could have happened in my life happened. My startup failed. And it's when my startup failed that I finally admitted to myself that I was completely lost. And this is when I started wondering if I remove the traditional definitions of success, if I reconnect with myself and what I'm curious about, what do I want to work on? What do I want to explore? For me, it was the brain. I had always been curious about why we think the way we think, why we feel the way we feel, and this is what motivated me to go back to university to study neuroscience.
Oh, so when you face some things failed and you feel sad, oh, I can allow myself to be lost.
Yes, exactly. When we are lost, we try to find a solution very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
But being lost can be very helpful and can allow you to discover what you really want to do with your life and with your career.
In our developer community, many developers and including me, I'm an editor, but I'm still have so many stress. We have developer anxiety symptom, and I don't know is common or unique. Why is the tech community particularly prone to this?
It's because I think a lot of people in the tech community actually are very mission driven. They want to have a positive impact on the world,
Yeah.
right?
When I enter the introductory, I want to change the world.
Yes, exactly. And because of that, you can forget your own health and your own curiosity because you are so focused on the mission.
And how to change it? How to change it?
This is why you need to start experimenting more. So, when we are very focused on the goals and the mission, we are very, very productive, but we don't stop to try and see if maybe there's a different way to do things. This is why I wrote this book, Tiny Experiments, to encourage people to be more curious and to try different approaches. And so the idea is to start designing tiny experiments in your life and work, not to start from a place of control, but to start from a place of curiosity instead, just like a scientist.
When I read your book, and I have the first question is because in China we often say a small goal. I want to know how about the small goal and the tiny experiments? What's difference?
A goal, whether it is big or small, it has a very precise definition of success. There is an outcome that you want to get. You want a specific result. So if you get to that result, success. If you don't get that result, failure.
Oh.
That's a goal. It can be big or small, it doesn't change anything. With an experiment, and especially with a tiny experiment, there is no binary definition of success and failure. Because if you learn something new, this is success. Whatever the outcome, whatever the result. And this is the big difference between a goal and an experiment. Goal, you want a specific outcome, and experiment, whatever the outcome. All you want to do is to discover something new, to learn something new.
Okay, and we can talk about AI because AI is very popular in China and all around the world. If you design a 30 days experiment about a framework for AI anxiety, how can we do that?
So when you design an experiment, you need two things. You need the action you're going to test, and you need the duration of the trial, so the trial period. So for example, with testing a framework, the action could be, I will try, this new AI framework every day for 1 hour. And so that's the action. And then the duration, you can say for 10 days. And what is very important is that for the duration of the experiment, you do not judge the result yet. You have to collect your own data. So you have to finish the experiment. So every day you spend 1 hour testing. At the end of the duration, at the end of the experiment, then you analyze the data and you ask, okay, what worked? What didn't work? And what do I want to change? What do I want to tweak for the next iteration of the experiment?
Okay, and what tiny experiment do you do now?
I currently have a journaling experiment. I journal every morning
Oh yeah.
because I find it very good for my creativity, productivity, but also for my mental health. So for me, it is a mindfulness practice. I also have one AI experiment that I use in my work every day. I take something I wrote and I ask for feedback. And it is like a writing coach for me. And my favorite question is, what did I miss? And the AI will tell me the parts, the gaps in my thinking, so I can then make the reasoning stronger in my writing. This is very, very helpful, especially for scientific research, because nowadays there are so many papers, there is so much research, and it's impossible for one researcher to think about every single piece of research that has been produced. So it makes my research better by telling me the gaps that I'm missing.
Okay, and we can talk about your first tiny experiments. Just write one articles in 100 days, but it actually took you about 130 days. You can share with us this story.
That was my first experiment. It was when I went back to university to study neuroscience, and I discovered a very interesting phenomenon. It's called the generation effect. The generation effect is a psychological phenomenon that shows that when you create your own version of something, you're going to understand it and remember it better. So, for example, if you teach something to someone, you will remember it better. If you create your own podcast, you will remember it better. Yeah. If you write, you will remember it better. So I thought, this is great. I'm going to use the generation effect to better understand and remember what I'm studying in university about the brain. So my experiment was, I will write one short article every day for 100 weekdays. You said 130 days because it was 100 weekdays, but with the weekends, 130 days. But I didn't do it during the weekends because I wanted to take a break. And some of those articles were very, very short. And sometimes I wrote the articles in the morning. Sometimes I wrote the articles late in the evening when I felt like, oh, I haven't done my article for today. I had to do it very quickly before going to bed. Sometimes I wrote my article in front of the gate at the airport before getting on the plane because I was very, very late that day as well. But I managed to do it every day. And when I finished the experiment, I realized that this had changed my life. I had built a community of readers who were waiting for my articles. And also at a personal level, every day I was looking forward to the moment that I could write my ideas for that day. So this experiment turned into my own business now. I have been writing those articles now for 5 years. And after a while, publishers started reaching out and asked me, have you thought about writing a book about those ideas that you write about? And I said yes. And this book became Tiny Experiments, which is now available in China.
Oh yeah. From one article to one book.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. We have an idea just called OPC because it's very popular in China because AI. We can use AI make everything. So many people want to use AI to try his idea. I think it's like so many tiny experiments in that. But I don't know how can we find this tiny experiment is failed, or we should stop it, or we can continue.
This is the very important part of the analysis of the experiment, because if you keep on collecting data, but you never analyze the data, you're not going to learn and you're not going to be able to decide the next step. So when you finish an experiment, you have three options in front of you. And let's say it's an AI experiment, for example, that you did. So first option is to just persist, continue with the experiment. So I always tell people it's very important to analyze the external signals and the internal signals. External signals is everything that is like metrics that you can put in a dashboard. So for example, if you're building an AI tool, you could look at user engagement, or maybe the page views, or even financial metrics, how many people are paying for your tool, for example. Those are the external metrics of success. And this is very important, but it's not the only thing that you should look at. You should also look at the internal signals. How did it feel to run the experiment? The problem is if you have positive external signals, but you are always burned out when working on this project, something is wrong. And you need to pay attention to that. This is really important. So at the end of the experiment, look at external signals and internal signals. If both look good, so people are using your AI tool, there's good engagement, everything is great. Internal signals, you're having fun, you're enjoying building the tool. Great, keep going. Option 1. Option 2, maybe the external signals are kind of good and the internal signals kind of good, but it's not perfect. Then this is when you want to pivot. That means you're going to change some parameters of the experiment. So for example, let's say that you said that you were going to publish one AI tutorial every day for 2 weeks, but you found it really, really hard to keep going every day. Maybe that was too much and the quality of the tutorials were not so good. And the user said, we don't think this is really good quality. Maybe you can change the experiment and say, I will publish an AI tutorial every 3 days. This way, you have more time to create more quality AI content for your users rather than rushing through it. So that's option number 2, where you change the parameters of the experiment. Option number 3 is stop. The experiment helps you learn that this is not working. This is not a good approach for you. If the external signals look bad, no users, no money, nothing, and the internal signals look bad, you are burned out, exhausted, stressed, then you can say, thank you, experiment, for teaching me this. Now we're good. We can stop.
Okay, got it. It's very good advice. We can talk about so many different cultures. Your career spans 3 countries, born in France and worked at Google in San Francisco and now based in London. How have these different cultures shaped your understanding of productivity and success?
It's very interesting how productivity is a very cultural thing. We all have, in different cultures, we all have a different definition of what productivity means. I am French. In France, our definition of productivity is very different than the definition in China. So you said, what, 996? No, 996, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
We have this culture.
996.
Yeah.
In France, we have 36 hours
Oh,
a week.
really?
Yes. So we work 7 hours a day for 5 days. That's it. So it's a very different approach. And in the UK, for example, sometimes productivity can be about showing that you're productive, showing to your boss, but maybe you're not so productive actually. So it can be very political. And this is why I think experimentation is so important, because you need to take into account your culture. You need to take into account the society you're working in and who you are working with. So you cannot copy paste the productivity systems from others. You need to take all of those parameters into account. And this is how you figure out what works for you. So this is why I don't like when people give productivity systems and say, here is a universal productivity system that can work for everyone. I don't think that exists. I think every single individual needs to figure out the productivity system that works for them.
Silicon Valley's move fast and break things, and just like Europe's work-life balance. And I know your French and Asian by cultural background. What insights have each offered for you?
I think you can take a little bit like like a recipe when you want to make good food. You need different spices.
Oh yeah.
And I think about it like that. Take a little bit of the spice from the US, a little bit from Europe, a little bit from Asia, and then you will have a really good dish. So I think that in the US, the ambition can be really good because you have startups where they decide to really do really big things and they want to change the world. That's good. But you don't want to take everything, because sometimes they also makes them take shortcuts because they want to be as quick as possible. I think in Europe, you want to take a little bit of the work-life balance, but not too much, because we know, for example, that there are countries and cultures where it is very hard to start a business because the culture is anti-ambition. So a bit of work-life balance, but not everything. And I think in China, you have amazing work ethic, which can be really, really good, but also too much pressure. So you don't take that. A bit of spice from everybody and you cook this, and this is when you have the perfect recipe, I think.
That's interesting. And why you finally choose to live in London? You will live in London forever?
No, I was born in Paris, but for me, I love London because it is the perfect mix of spices. Because it has actually a very multicultural culture. I think London is the most multicultural city in Europe. And for me, I can live in a global city where I get to work with people from the US, people from Europe, and people from China. Everybody is in London. And I am still very close to my family and friends, so I can still visit. So for me, it is the right balance of professional and personal.
Okay, let's talk about your book, The Core. Is the PACT framework.
Yeah.
And first, you can share the PACT framework with us.
The PACT framework is a way to think about how you want to design really good experiments. And PACT, PAC, stands for purposeful, actionable, continuous, and trackable. Purposeful, P, means that any experiment that you run needs to be an experiment that is meaningful to you, something that you are truly curious about, where you really want to learn what the answer is. So you should not experiment with something just because everybody around you is experimenting with something. It needs to be purposeful and something you are truly curious about. P. Then A is for actionable. I see too many people say, oh, I wish I could run this experiment, but I don't have enough money, I don't have enough time, I don't have the right professional network. And this is why you need to choose an experiment that is actionable, something you can start today with the resources at your disposal right now. So no excuse saying I cannot start. Actionable, A. C, continuous. When you have a goal is one shot on the target, fail or success. With an experiment, you need repeated trials. This is how you know if there is a pattern rather than just a coincidence. If you do something once and it succeeds, it could be just luck. But if you do something several times and it succeeds, now you know there is an actual pattern. This is why you want the experiment to be continuous, which means that you say, I will try this for every day for 2 weeks, or for 1 month, or for 3 months, or like me with my first experiment for 100 days. So that's the continuous part, C. Lastly, T, trackable. Trackable is different from measurable. In SMART goals, they have M, measurable. In PACT is T for trackable. The only thing you need to track here is, did you do it or not? Yes or no? And you can even use a little tracker with little crosses, and you just say yes, 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 no, yes, 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 if you did it or not. And that's it while you run the experiment. No judgment, no premature data analysis. You need to wait until you are finished collecting the data to start analyzing the result.
Okay, and then in this part, I remember you emphasize the intentional imperfection,
Yeah.
shape a working vision first, then iterate. But in developer culture, also said we often said it called it as a technical debt. How do you distinguish between healthy imperfection and the technical debt that will drag you down?
Yes. So healthy imperfection means that you know that you cannot always be 100% everywhere. So, for example, if you are very focused on shipping or coding a project that is launching next week, it will be very hard to be 100% at home as a parent or as a partner. And it is very important to communicate that to other people and say, all of my focus, all of my attention, all of my energy is on this project right now. This way, people in your life can know that they cannot expect 100% from you. At work, when you practice intentional imperfection, you actually end up making better work because you know where you are focusing your attention. When it comes to technical debt, it is really important to keep on going back and fixing things as you go rather than letting the debt accumulate. This is actually very aligned with the experimental mindset because instead of trying to go always for the big shiny goal, you can go back and make all of the tiny changes that are going to improve the product. And so an example of tiny experiment that you can run is say, I will spend 1 hour or 2 hours every week going back through the code and fixing any bugs that I see. It is not shiny. It is not a big goal. Maybe it doesn't sound impressive, but actually this can have a really positive impact on the life cycle of the product.
Okay, and I remember you shared the three cognitive scripts. I want to know how do you think about the technology developments in that?
This is a really good question. So for the three scripts that I talk about in the book, the first one is the SQL script that has nothing to do with SQL for coding. It's a SQL in the sense that you make decisions today based on the decisions that you made in the past. So for example, if you studied something in university, you will only apply for jobs that align with what you studied in university. SQL script, where your choices need to make sense based on the choices in the past. Second script is the crowd pleaser script. It's the script you follow when you make decisions based on what you think is going to please the people around you. The people around you could be your colleagues, for example, where you make decisions based on the wisdom of the crowd, but not your own intuition. And the last one is the epic script, inspired by Hollywood movies, where you make decisions based on what is the most impressive thing. You think that anything you do, you need to change the world, and anything less than that is not worth your time. When it comes to the developer community, I think that we can fall prey to all three different scripts. So you see, for example, developers that keep on using the same frameworks because it's the framework that they know. It is the SQL script. And so instead of going through the discomfort of maybe testing a new tool, a new approach, a new framework, they just stick to what they know. Or if they studied a very specific way of building and coding in university, they will keep on applying that in their job or only apply to jobs that are aligned with what they learned in university. Number one. And then number two, for the crowd pleaser script. I think especially for junior developers, it can be a bit scary maybe to voice your thoughts and opinions in a work environment, especially if people around you seem to have more technical ability. And so because of that, you might make decisions because everybody tells you this is how you're supposed to do it. So if people tell you, oh, this is how you should build this, this is what the product should look like, and you say, oh, okay, if everybody says this, let's do it this way. But I think in tech, the most insidious script is the epic script, because we see it with startup founders, and our entire society tells us, celebrates the epic script, saying, you need to change the world. You need to be on a mission.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Especially now in AI.
Exactly. And if you sacrifice your mental health, that's okay. Mission first. This is a very dangerous script to follow.
Okay, and then we can talk about the impact of about the AI for brain. And in past, in China, we often, as a developer, we often say, oh, I can't write in code without CSDN, because CSDN is the largest developer community in China. And now we often said, oh, I can't write code if I haven't AI.
Yes.
We often use just like Cloud Code or Cursor and so on. But I don't know how about that for our brain.
It is actually worrying because when we outsource all of our thinking, then we stop using the neural connections for some skills, and we lose those skills. If you want to maintain skills in your life, you need to use them. And so when we rely on AI for everything, we lose those neural connections. It is very important to keep some part of your work that you do just with your brain, your own brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we often discuss when we are a student, we enter the industry and we as an engineer. But now everything has changed. We still need to learn how to write code. That is a problem.
Is that going to be a problem long term or not? The best comparison that we have is the invention of the calculator. Now, most people cannot calculate just by, just through their, in their mind, right? People need to use a calculator. But it's okay, because maybe it's okay to not use your mind for this. I wonder in the future if maybe it's okay that not everybody knows to code at a lower level. So I think it's just that, how do you have high level code and low level code?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's just going to be a shift. And the new high level code is going to be to know how to talk to an AI.
Yeah. And you can share about yourself, just like what role does, just like in your work, just like writing, research, or your company. How do you draw the boundary between what AI can help with and what I must do by myself?
I always ask myself, what am I optimizing away? So AI has promised us to remove some of the boring work so we can do the fun work. But we are automating all the fun work now. We have AI doing all the writing for us, all the thinking for us. And I don't want that to happen in my company. So I use AI when it is work I don't want to do. Yeah. And so any admin, I use AI. This is 100% okay. Then I never use AI for the thinking part, especially the initial thinking part. It's very important, I think, first. What I like to do now is maybe old school, but a good protection mechanism is if there's an important project, I will first take a notebook, traditional notebook first, and I will write my thoughts. And then after, I will take a photo and put it in AI, and then I can then go further and have a conversation. But I always have the first step coming straight from my brain. It's very important. That's the easy ones where creative work, never AI. Administrative work, always AI. In the middle, there are some projects where it can be difficult to know yes or no, is it okay or no. I take these on a case-to-case basis. And one example is with research work, for example. AI is so helpful for research. I think I'm doing better research with AI than without AI. So I always still try to start from my own brain, but I think of AI as a thinking companion, a partner to go further together.
Okay, and then next we can talk about yourself, and you can share with developers. The first is if you go back or return to when you're in Google, just about 25 or 27 years old. If you could send a message to you, what would you say? And what tiny experiment would you suggest you design for us?
If I could go back in the past or send a message to my younger self when I was still working at Google, I would tell to the young Anne-Laure, it's okay to experiment more. It's okay to make mistakes. You don't have to do everything perfectly. It's okay to take breaks. You don't have to sacrifice your mental health in order to be successful. And the tiny experiments that I would take would be around experimenting more with others, experimenting with my colleagues, experimenting in my work, not being so focused on climbing the ladder and getting the next promotion at work. Really trying to test more things together.
If a developer have to face, I must keep this job because I have a family to support. How can they do some tiny experiments?
I'm so glad you're asking this question because a misconception that people have about my book is that they think that maybe you need to quit your job to experiment. But no, this is why the book is called Tiny Experiments.
Yeah, it's very tiny.
It's very tiny. You don't need to quit your job. You don't need to start your own startup. You can stay in your current job. What is very important is to make space for experimentation in your work and in your life. Tiny space for experimentation. So my advice for someone who says, I cannot quit this job because I have a family, I tell them, you don't have to quit this job. This is really okay. But what kind of experiments do you want to run? So maybe if you are interested in an AI topic, you could do an experiment where you say, every Monday I will reach out to an AI expert and ask one question, for example. Or you could do an experiment where you say, every week I will test one new AI tool or or I will read one AI tutorial. So you can have those tiny experiments. And you can also experiment in your personal life. So you could have a meditation experiment, walking experiment, yoga experiment, drawing, journaling experiment.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be big and you don't have to quit your job.
Oh, that's great. And finally, if you could leave our Chinese developer and the Chinese reader with one message, and how to stay clear-headed and in this year of uncertainty.
Yes.
You can share one message.
Yes, absolutely. To me, the best discovery I made when I retrained as a neuroscientist is how scientists relate to uncertainty. Normally, our reaction in front of uncertainty is fear, and we try to escape the uncertainty as quickly as possible. A scientist, when they're faced with uncertainty, they get excited. They feel like, ooh, interesting. What can I learn here? So this is my advice for developers. When you see uncertainty, take that opportunity to experiment, to be curious, and to maybe discover something new.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.